everybody. Welcome to the Renegade Society show. I am the Society radio show. Sorry, I am not your usual host, but I am Amanda McKnight, one of the content creators here on Renegade. And today with me, I have the wonderful and amazing game designer and RPG writer, Sen, joining me. So hello, Sen.
Hey there,
Welcome
how
to
are
the
you doing?
show. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
Yeah, excellent. So the other thing we have going on today is if you do have questions for us, just be sure to plug those into the chat if you have questions for Sen, and we will be getting to those later. So get those ready for us. Other than that, we have a giveaway going on today as well, and the code word for that giveaway is going to be diary. And I believe what we're giving away today is we're giving some Kids on Bikes sets, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that is correct. 2 of those full sets for you guys. So make sure you know that code word when it is time. All right, friends. So Sen, do you want to tell us a little bit more about you and who you are, where can we find you work, and
Sure.
sort of what you do?
So my name is Sen. I am a Chinese Canadian from London, Ontario, Canada, the second best London in the world for 137 years running now.
I would agree with that, being that I'm so close to London, Ontario.
It's the second best, though. I mean, the first best obviously being London, Kentucky. No, I'm kidding. London, UK is much better. And
I was going to agree with you, but all right.
Oh, have you ever been to London, Kentucky?
I have never been to London, Kentucky. All the people from London, Kentucky are like, it is great. I bet in the chat.
Maybe. And I am a college professor. I teach psychology and I'm a therapist as well. So that's my job and that's what I do during the day. And then by night, I transform into a game designer, an intrepid game designer, in fact. And I've been involved.
Do you have a cape when you're game designing at night?
I'm only 5'2", so the cape kind of cramps my style. I trip on it a lot. So no, I do not have a cape. But if somebody wants to make me a really short cape, I would wear it. I don't know if you've ever seen Daryl's cape. Have you seen Daryl's Rhino Hero cape?
I have not seen Daryl's Rhino Hero cape, but now I'm going to have to ask him next time I see him.
I don't know if he actually has it still, but he might.
I wouldn't be surprised, but also I feel like everyone should have a Rhino Hero cape.
Well,
because
right.
That sounds great. And I bet they're short. Are they? Because they're probably
they are.
Children.
They really, really are. And so, yeah, I'm a psych prof, so I use a lot of psychology and game design. And I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, so that was my big thing, all the way from the time I was like 6 years old till now.
Wow! So you started playing when you were 6?
Yeah, so I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for 42 years. I just started my 12-year-old son on his first campaign on the weekend with his friends, so that was fun.
Yeah. How did that go? Did you run it? Were you the
yeah
the GM?
Yeah, I was the GM. Yeah. It was fun. Yeah, Eli, who actually helped me write a bunch of the adventures for Kids on Bikes.
That's so awesome.
He loves writing. He had a hoot and he played a Dragonborn paladin, and his friend Jace was a tiefling fighter. So they had a very interesting combination of lawful good and chaotic evil. But
wow, that's you know what? That's how it goes. I feel like that is the D&D way. You have to have the good and you have to have the evil. I will say I don't think I've ever played with a group of people who have been like, we're all good, we're all evil. There's always that little bit of clash in the party that makes it interesting. I think. What's your alignment, would you say, is do you tend to gravitate towards?
If you go by things like, the 9 grids that you see on Facebook all the time, I'm definitely more of like chaotic good to chaotic neutral type person. Definitely chaotic, and then somewhere between neutral and good. I usually play bards and rogues, so people who are small and leap like me, skillful. So
I've always been a rogue person myself, so I feel
right.
Did you find that Eli was doing sort of something similar to what you would normally do, or is he kind of doing his complete own?
No, he's doing his own thing. So Eli and both my sons, Eli and Ethan, are in theater. So he was rolling with it. He was having a good time just making stuff up and talking in voices and stuff like that. I think he kind of weirded out his friend a little bit. But the hilarious thing is that Jace, his friend, had come over to our house to show me his board games that he's designed.
What?
He's 12
I feel
years
like
old. Yeah, and he has made
that is so rare, and
he
especially
made
today,
he made a
making board
game
games for
based
kids.
on, well, they're all based on like app games and things like that. So he made one
Oh,
based
that's so cool.
on Brawl Stars, and then the other one that he was showing me was based on Call of Duty, the zombie stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then he and Eli had got, I have pictures of them somewhere. I don't know where I put them, but they're like just like Steven Universe card games that they make in class instead of like
Yes.
of
Oh, I
working in
love
class.
Steven Universe. I love that
Yeah.
so much. That's
So
so
they would make
cute.
little card games, and so when Erica and Andrew were making Steven Universe, I
Yeah.
said, "You'll never beat this," and I sent them pictures of it, and they thought that was
I
funny.
mean, you won't. I mean, also, I think that the idea of making board games based on app games that are successful is like actually a genius. Like I'm like this is a genius idea. These
Yeah,
kids
I
know
mean,
what's
it's
up.
it's how Lucky Duck got started, right? So
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
lot of ways, the idea about expertise from a psychology professor perspective, if
Hmm.
you want to understand it, is experts are just people, we think of them as people who can hire, who put things in hierarchies really well. That's all we think experts are.
Hmm.
And then as kids gain more expertise in things, they are able to be more creative with it because they understand how to sort and find in from their long-term memory without using their working memory. And so a lot of people who become experts at anything are just really, really good at organizing their thoughts to the point where they can become creative with it because they understand where everything lays in terms of like, Pokemon. And, if you understand Pokemon, then you understand grass type and dark type and all these types, and you categorize by that.
Yeah, it's like when you like as someone who has a lot of experience teaching board games to people, and
Hmm.
that was basically one of my main jobs for a few years of my life. People would always say, "How do you know so many games? Like, how do you become like a board game teaching expert?" And I would say, "Well, once you know these games and you can draw the parallels between these
Yeah.
mechanics, you know, as long as you know all game mechanics, you know all games. And while there are many games that obviously do things that are unique and different. Um, there really only are quite a few. Like there's only like a handful of
Yeah.
mechanics,
They're like
really, if you
building
boil it
blocks.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then
And
you
then
just
you
have to know
put
things
things
like,
together and layer them.
yeah, how many cards do you deal out?
That's
Right.
the hardest part. How many cards do you deal out? Actually, usually five is a good guess,
Five,
but it
five,
can change.
seven,
Five,
anywhere in between
seven.
five and
Yeah.
seven. That's a good guess.
Speaking of board games as well, so you started out with D&D then when
Yeah.
you were 6,
Yeah.
which is amazing. I can't even remember what I was doing when I was 6. Definitely not playing D&D. But how did you bridge that gap? Like, when was the part where you really got interested in board gaming?
It
Uh,
was because I went to school for 9 years to do what I
yeah.
do, and to do that I had to sacrifice something, and it was gaming. I had to
Oh,
stop, basically stop role playing, because it ate up so much of my time and my brain
yeah.
space and things like that.
So
And
was
so
that
what?
when you were studying for psychology and doing all of that
Yeah,
work?
starting to be a therapist.
Mhm.
So it was basically I had kind of gotten into things like in between going for my master's level stuff and my undergrad, I had gotten into like magic and whatnot as well. And then it's like, I can't do it anymore because I want to be serious about school. So I sold everything and I paid for my degree, my next degree, with what the money that I made selling my magic cards. I had a lot of magic cards.
Oh yeah.
And so
I've heard there's so many people actually
yeah.
that say I had so many magic cards and I look at what I bought with these. I'm like,
Yeah, I mean, like, if I
wow.
had them now, I'd probably be, a couple 100,000 air, but at the
Yeah.
time, it was like,
It's
ten, twenty
always the
thousand
time when
dollars.
it's convenient to let go of the magic
Yeah,
cards or that you need to let go of them that
and
people let
I'm
go
I'm
usually.
fine with that. I'm
Yeah.
okay with that.
Yeah.
Um, but then anyway, so what happened was I still wanted to play games because I've always loved games. I've always, dabbled in making games. Magic was the first one that really kind of I pulled the veil back and said, okay, this is how they're designing these cards. I understand this. I was at that state in life where it's like, oh, I understand. I understand all the math behind this. And then my friend Errol, who lived with myself and Jay Cormier, the guy that I design a lot of games with, we all lived together. And when he graduated a year ahead of us. He got into German board games, as we called them at the time, Euro games, right?
Euro
And
games.
so
Yeah.
he introduced us to him. And we thought, after a while, after we became experts in these, hey, let's make a Euro game. And so we tried and it
Wow.
sucked. and we
I was gonna
stopped.
say that's very ambitious to be like, let's start with Euros.
Well, so I think that's how a lot of people start with things is they like something, they do a lot of it, they like it so much that they think they can
They're
do
like,
it.
I want to do it. Yeah.
Right. And then they try and they fail. And a lot of people just stop right there and say, I guess I couldn't do it. I guess I suck at it. And the thing
I mean,
about
that
Jay
doesn't
and
sound like a
I,
fun way to live, but yeah,
no,
I feel
you
you.
always suck.
Yeah.
And the thing about Jay and I, though, is that we're very persistent. Like, if nothing else, we will persist. And so we picked it up a game like 5 years after. Not the same game, although the same game did become something later. We picked it up 5 years later when I had my first son. We had gone out to visit Jay in Vancouver because he moved away. And we said, hey, you know what? That game design thing that we started like 5 6 years ago, let's do that again because we needed something to keep in communication because Jay and I are, we're best friends, but if there wasn't something to talk about, we might not talk as much. And so we really wanted to keep the relationship solid and flowing, and we thought game design, let's do that again. And 2 years later we had our first big game signed, I think maybe even less than 2 years, maybe a year after. No, 2 years. It was 2 years. And so, yeah, the start of it all was something to do.
Yeah.
It was a
Something to
hobby.
do. Let's make a Euro game because we love Euro games.
Yeah, and together,
Yeah.
right? And we were like,
So what was that first game that you said? You said because you said you started on that and then that you threw it away and then it became, what did it become?
yeah, it
Which
became
game is it?
Akrotiri.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Oh.
1 second, just hold on 1 second. I'm gonna run around the corner.
Ooh, he's gonna go grab the game. That's awesome. I just love the concept of you doing that. You taking something and then it actually grows into something, even when you don't have it that first time. That's so amazing. If you guys have also any questions for Sen here, please feel free to let us know while he's going to grab this game. There are so many games that this amazing human has designed. So
it's too bad if
we're gonna get into that.
You
don't have it with you.
Oh no, here it is.
Oh,
right here. It's literally right next to me. So this is it.
Yeah.
This is our very first ever
Wow.
prototype. It is awful and horrible, and there's Jay's writing. You can see it. But
I like how you're just like flaunting Jay's bad writing. You're like, this is all Jay's writing on
all
this.
Jay's bad writing and my bad art. So there's lots of bad stuff in there. But it was based on Jay has a real love for Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided, let's make a game about something we like, right? Because we know it, so we can be creative with it, right? And let's make a game about Indiana Jones exploring the jungle. And the idea behind this particular game was that we wanted to make a modular map because we really like that sense of exploration when you turn over tiles.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with tile-based games is that if you're searching for treasure in a tile-based game, how do you know where that treasure ever is unless you turn over a tile that says, hey, there's treasure there?
Yeah.
And so we wanted to create a way in a tile-based game where treasure could be anywhere you didn't know. And so we made this weird map system that you piece together a map based on like piratey type of landmarks, like two paces north of the palm tree and 7 paces left of the, bog or
so
whatever.
You're like uncovering these pieces of the map as you go.
Yeah. So you find these pieces of the map to make your thing. And so Akrotiri uses that. When we made Akrotiri, we had this pick up and deliver and market system that was really solid and really smooth and people loved it, but we didn't have a hook. And then we thought, well, what about that game over there that we put on the shelf for a while? And so that became the hook of Akrotiri, where if you've ever played it, you'll say like, that's really different. And it's like a kind of a brain twist.
Yeah.
And if you've ever played Tobago's like Akrotiri in reverse.
So those are
really cool games that I really enjoy because the sense of exploration in it is so strong. Because you're like, oh, I got to uncover that landmark because if I can put that landmark there, then it makes my map come true, and then I can go collect my treasure there. And so that's really where that came from. Was that original first game that sat on a shelf for probably about 7 years before we used it in Akrotiri.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that you came back to it though. I love that
so do I. And I
found a spot for it.
That's why
it's like the map. It's like you're making the map. Really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
In the game. That's amazing.
Yeah, and so that's for me. Akrotiri is one of our favorite games. Both Jay and I really love Akrotiri because it is a testament, I think, to
Mhm.
us as,
Yeah.
you know, as people who persevere, right? So
Yeah.
we're not giving up on that game yet. Yes, it's on the shelf, and yes, it stinks, but there's little bits of it that could probably be really cool if we could
Yeah.
ever just find the place for it. And I think that's like you said, Amanda, when you said, games are really just little, mechanics that we stick together.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this is. It's just this one little piece that we took out of this bigger thing and stuck
Yeah.
it into this other thing. And all of a sudden, it makes sense. It just clicked.
I
Right.
think
Whereas
that's the
before it
hard
was like,
thing when you're designing games. When you're making anything, really, is finding all the right pieces and how they connect together and putting that together.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, so um, just to bring Renegade back into the mix, like Chris Chung's Lanterns game. The second I saw it, way back when, like way back when, it's like there's something here, Chris. There's something here. But it was about flowers and stuff at the time. It's like, can't be about flowers. You got to figure out something else. But it was all together there, which is very different than Akatir, which wasn't like together yet.
Yeah.
And then some other games where things are coming together, that you're looking at a whole instead of just pieces of it.
Hmm.
Where you need that extra little bit to kind of push it over the top into something that is now going to be wildly successful. There's all these little things that there's games that are okay,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
then there's games
Yeah.
that are great, right? There's
There
so
are a
many
lot of games
that
that are okay,
are okay,
I think. Yeah.
right? Um, like in a game like Clank, like let's say Clank came around and it didn't have the noise tokens. I mean, then it wouldn't be called Clank, but let's say it just was like we're going dungeon diving and we have deck building, and the first one to get out, great.
That's
We'll end
it.
it there. It's a race to come out.
Yeah.
But Direwolf put in that that noise in the bag mechanic, and all of a sudden it catapults it into this game that has this whole new level of tension to it.
Yeah, it's
So that was
excitement
beautiful.
in
Yeah,
Clank.
right.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting because so you went from RPGs to gaming
Yeah.
to making a game that was a prototype that you just that sat on a shelf for forever. When was the part where you moved from, like, were you doing any gaming before you reached back for that prototype?
Oh,
Or
always.
yeah.
I can't stop gaming. I'm constantly gaming. If you take a look at my stats for like Star Realms, you'll know that I'm constantly gaming because
Oh my
I
goodness,
think I've
Star
played over
Realms.
7,000 games of Star Realm.
Oh,
So
I'm
I
not
play a lot of
surprised.
games, right? So
I love playing Star Realms, but I'm so behind everybody else's. I mean, I still play a lot of Star Realms, but I'm the type of person that I play with everyone that plays every day. And then I get in there and they're like just wiping the floor with me. And I'm like, wow, like, don't you play? And I'm like, I play a lot. I just
well, I
can't
mean,
keep
the funny
up.
thing about it is that I actually think, a reasonably good player is only ever going to win Star Realms about 50% of the time anyway.
Yeah, that's well, especially when you're playing in the big leagues of
Yeah.
the people that I usually play with. But
And
when it
most of
comes,
the times it's a mistake. Like most of the time I lose because I made a mistake.
that is so true with Star Realms. That is so. I always make one. People are like, "This is where you went wrong." I'm like, I know because I felt
know.
it when it happened. I was like, "Oh, there goes the game."
Yeah, which
Not
is
getting
cool in
that
a way,
back.
right?
So when you were still gaming, but when
Oh
were
yeah.
you? When did you move straight to designing games? Was that from?
So it was when my first son was old enough to not really need me as much, I guess. So it was when he was, because I had this whole plan. I literally had a plan. I here, watch this. I'll show you. So this is a painting kit
Mhm.
that is as old as my son, because I bought it when he was born, thinking that I would have time to paint miniatures. I'll put him in his
So
crib
fun.
and I'll paint miniatures and I'll watch him. I'll get him stuff when he needs it. Oh, it'll be awesome. Guess how many miniatures I've painted since he was born?
Maybe one, two.
It's less.
Half of a miniature.
Yeah, maybe.
One arm.
Besides that, I actually don't like painting miniatures. I'm not very good at it.
Oh yeah, I'm
But
very bad at it.
I
feel
wanted
you.
to try. I had bought like a whole Warjack, for Privateer Press. I had bought like a
Yeah.
bunch of War Machine mechs to
Yeah.
paint because they're big,
Oh.
and so they're easier for me to paint with my
Yeah.
bad eyesight. But still, it did.
You're like, I'm gonna have so much time to paint
Oh
all these
yeah, and so
guys.
no, I didn't.
And you were like, I have negative
Yeah,
time. Great.
negative time. So
Negative time.
when he was about 2 was when we started doing all of this stuff because he was a little more mobile.
Mhm.
Um, I'd also just before that, 'cause, yeah, so just around a year and a bit before he was born, I was in a very very bad car accident. And so I was in a car accident that was basically off work for like 6 months. I had my leg
Oh,
shoved up into my hip socket, and the engine of the car was like here in my face type thing.
yikes.
So it's bad.
Yeah.
And I still have like glass in my face. Like next time you see me, just if you see me, go, hey, show me the glass in your face, and I'll show you all this glass in my neck and my face. Because it's a
That's how I'll
talking
greet you
point
next time I
apparently,
see
right?
you. Yes, son. Next
Hey there,
time.
glass face.
Hey, son, show me that glass in your
Right.
face.
But the point is
Yikes.
that I kind of shifted my focus because
Mm,
nearly dying, getting hit by a transport truck will do that to you.
yeah,
To like say, hey, I love my job, I love what I do, I love working at the hospital, but there's other stuff in
yeah,
life that
that's
I'm missing,
important.
like my friends, like gaming, like being creative, and all those things. And I'm lucky. I have because I'm an occupational therapist. I have this very different set of like therapies that I do. Like I actually make things for therapeutics. So, and I was
That's
involved in
cool.
technology, so I would program computers and make devices that would help people who were um, basically I work in communication science, so I work with people who can't speak or write, and so I would
Oh,
make
okay.
things so that they could, with computer programmers, with engineers, all that kind of stuff. um,
That
so
sounds
I was
like
always,
such valuable
it's,
work.
yeah, it's super
That's
cool.
amazing.
And it is, except it wasn't fulfilling my need for creative outlet as much as I thought it would.
Mhm, mhm.
It definitely helped me to help other people. I love doing that. But my big thing, I guess, all my life is there's something in here that needs to get out. And there always
Yeah.
has been. There's always been ideas that just need to get out and put onto paper and do something. And I never would do it because I had this really big problem. And my one of my teachers had said, Sen, I know why you don't finish your projects. This is my favorite teacher, Mrs. Sarter, bless her soul. She's still alive, so not that she's dead, just I love her. Um, so she had told
Bless her
me,
living soul.
Beth, her living soul. She had told me one day, she sat me down and said, I know why you don't finish everything. Because I never finished anything in class. She is my gifted teacher, so she really didn't care. There's no
Yeah.
marks involved. It's just like, we need to keep this kid, on track. We need to keep him doing things because otherwise he's gonna like invent something that's gonna destroy the world. That's what he said. And
Gotta keep this
so,
kid busy.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So she said to me, and this has stuck with me ever since. And it wasn't until I was like way later in life that I said, that was right. I should have listened to her. She said that I never finished anything because it was so perfect in my head that me, 12-year-old me, putting it on paper was never good enough. And so when I got into game design, it's like, oh, I don't have to do all of it. Other people are actually interested in doing the art part of it or the graphic design part of it. And they're much better than I am. Like I can draw and I can do graphic design. I just don't do it as fast as or as well as other people.
Yeah.
So when we did our very first, professionally done game, and it was Gavin Brown, who is our graphic designer, who is
Uh-huh.
the owner operator of Roxley Games, and you've seen Roxley's designs
Mhm,
and Roxley's,
mhm.
that's Gavin. All the
Yeah,
graphic design stuff is Gavin. Some of the illustration is Gavin, and
it's great.
his art direction, his sense of art is great. And then our second game was Josh Capel doing all the illustration and graphic design. So we were blessed by having two of the best, not just in Canada but around the world, in terms of professional board game graphic designers and illustrators work on our games. And it was just a light went off in my head saying, oh yeah, I don't have to do everything by myself. I can hire people or I can connect publishers with people who I enjoy working with, who
Yeah.
have more better vision than what I do, or can translate the vision that I have into something that is amazing. Just like when we worked with Quanchai on our latest game that Banana and I did, which is Jiangshi Blood in the Banquet Hall.
Yes.
I just gave Quanchai notes. I said,
And
hey, buddy. Quanchai, by the way, is like my brother from another mother.
I
We're
love
like good friends.
Conchai. Conchai is so
So
great.
yeah, it's like, Quanchai, this is what I want you to draw. Here's a couple pieces that I think it should look like, and
Mhm.
just send some stuff back and some thumbnails. And with the implicit trust that we have together, it's like, holy cow, he knocked it out of the
Yeah.
park like in one go. We're like,
Wow. I mean, I'm not surprised,
that's pretty
but
much it. I just asked him for a couple things about color and placement of one thing, and the rest of it's
wow.
history. And
He
yeah,
was just
and
like
it's
this, and you were like, yeah, that's
yeah, just
amazing.
like that. So realizing that other people could help me make my dreams come true and take the vision, the thing that was in my head, and has really, in my life, anyways, I guess made me relax a bit because I used to
Mhm.
get all these ideas. Like, it's funny. So people ask me how I get so much stuff done. I just don't sleep. My sleep is horrible and it's not good at all. Don't do this, people. Like, don't stay up all day. But I can't sleep because I have stuff going on in my head all the time.
Yeah, because your head's so busy and you just
Yeah,
can't. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
A lot of
before
people that I know that are busy creative minds
mhm,
have a similar problem.
yeah, and before it was because I thought I had to do it all. Now it's because I have friends who will help me do it all. That's like, "Oh, I could do that now because somebody can
Yeah,
do that art. I know somebody who can write that kind of story. I know
yeah,
somebody who can make that kind of thing." So,
yeah.
it's a both a boon and a bane to know so many people. But yeah, um, I think, having people to help me realize the things that are going on in my skull and this big head bone I have, they've that's been the real big movement from being kind of a hobby designer to being like a
To being a
professional guy.
professional,
Yeah.
yeah, designer.
Is realizing
It's
that you don't have
crazy.
to do everything yourself.
Yeah, and that adjustment to the way that you thought of it and the way that you
Hmm.
saw it. That's amazing. And so when you were working on, I feel like I'm always saying it wrong. Jiangsu? Am I saying it
Uh,
right?
juncture. It's
Jiangsu.
it's so in the language I speak, the dialect I speak, it'd be like an you don't say the I. It's more like a U R at the end. It's really
You
weird.
are
Jung,
Jiangsu.
juncture. Yeah,
Jiangsu. Am
like
I saying it
drop
right?
the
Okay. Jiangsu.
But if you
Er.
said jiangxi, that's also acceptable.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna work on it. Next time I
Okay,
see you, things I'm gonna get right is
glass in the
saying the name.
face,
Yes,
and
glass in the face, and I'm gonna say juncture. I'm gonna drop my I'm gonna get more
okay,
in there.
all right.
So that game is pretty exciting because so some of the things. Which order should we do this in? Let's do this in this order.
Whatever you want.
So the people that you worked with on this amazing new RPG you have coming out
Yes.
are happen to be Renegade people, which I think
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah.
And then you have also done with Renegade the writing, some writing for kids on bikes.
Yes,
So,
and for epilogues of the North Sea.
oh, okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So
And
Renegade, I mean, Scott's a great guy, and he
mhm,
happens to, I think, attract really good people around him
mhm,
because of
mhm.
the company ethos and the high level of quality he puts into like almost anything he touches comes out
Goodness, yeah.
well, right? So, and the other thing is that like Scott always gives credit, right, to the people who make that happen.
Mhm.
It's a joy to work with him and to to hear him talk and to you know basically give everybody else props except himself. So he's wonderful, and anything to work with him is great.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
I would completely agree with that and my experience as well. And so what did you how did you get involved with specifically with kids on bikes when you were doing all that for us? Can you talk a little bit more about
Yeah,
just
for
sort of
sure.
what you
So
did, how
Kids
you
on
got
Bikes,
in?
yeah, Kids on Bikes is John Gilmore and Doug Lewandowski's
Mhm.
baby, really.
Oh,
And
it's so much fun.
yeah, and both Doug and John are very good friends of mine in terms of like we talk a lot
Mhm.
online, and we play games whenever we can. We hang out at cons whenever we can, and so it just became something where at some point they just said, "Hey, do you want to write something for Kids on Bikes?" I think it's because I expressed interest in this. Like Kids on Bikes is my life in a kind of a nutshell. Like 80s riding around on a bike and having mysteries. Like, great, this is awesome.
Sounds great.
Yeah, let's do this thing. And so they said, "Hey, do you want to write like an adventure hook?" It's like, "Yes, I do want to write an adventure hook." And from there, it just became, "Hey, do you want to write another adventure hook? And do you want to write like a species for kids in space? And let's do this stuff." And through that, then Tim and Kristen asked me to write some stuff for them. And through all of that, I guess Banana Chan and I have been talking around stuff earlier but we never really talked about working on a project together.
Yeah.
And we
It's so
eventually
funny too
did,
because we
though,
had Banana Chan on this show, I believe,
last week.
last week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I was like, this is like a weird, it's all coming together.
It is. It's a confluence.
Yes.
It's almost karmic.
It
So
is
yeah,
karmic.
Banana and I started talking about writing something together, and we had this experience. Well, I didn't. She did. But we know all about it because we talk about it in a very in a much wider like Asian game designing community.
Hmm.
And so she had this experience with this one game that was pretty, casually racist. It wasn't overtly racist. Like nobody was saying, "Oh, Chinese people suck." It was just, "Hey, we're gonna use this, Chinese menu to pick stats, and we're gonna, everybody's gonna order, Chinese food, and we're gonna talk about this." And it didn't say anything about, using accents and all these tropey things that maybe people who aren't Chinese probably shouldn't do. And so our reaction was to make a game about us and our experiences, especially being Chinese Canadian or Chinese
Mhm.
American, and that experience of immigration. And it also got started around the same time, like 2018 was probably when we really started it. Around the same time that a lot of immigration stuff was happening in America that wasn't so
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so we really started questioning that and thinking about telling those stories. And because we come from not the same type of family but definitely similar types of family, and we have lots of friends who come from similar types of families, we wanted to tell their stories. What is it like to live in a multi-generational household? What is it like to live on top of your business? What is it like to have to feed people every day? What is it like to do all these things? And all in the face of racism. So the Junksha, by the way, are hopping vampires.
Yes.
They're rigor
I
mortis,
was going
right?
to say one of the things that I loved when I was reading about this new RPG that you guys have coming out that I was excited about is I was like, okay, so it's tackling like actual political social
Yeah,
problems that we're dealing
yeah,
with as an antagonist, and there's vampires and there's delicious food and it's about family, and I was like, wow, I love all of these things. This is just so important and so relevant, especially I feel like right now. And I've
yeah.
also heard a little bit about the way that your book is structured, which I would love to talk to you
Sure.
more about. But yes, yeah, sorry, continue. But
No. And
I love it.
it's just interesting. So we wove in a lot of cultural
Folklore and
things, yeah,
yes, yeah.
into the game. The idea, though, was that it was really focusing on the juncture as an allegory for oppression,
Hmm.
and that by working together as a family, you can defeat that. Um, and the whole idea was that eventually it became, oh, our restaurant is actually another character, another family member almost. Because have you ever read The Giving Tree?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So to me, the restaurant is like the giving tree, the tree that gives so much until it's not there anymore. Although the new version's even better. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't seen
Uh,
the new version,
where the
but
where the giving tree has boundaries.
that's so great.
I will send you a link later, Amanda.
Yeah, send me a link to
Um,
that.
the idea of the restaurant is like the giving tree, that if you don't take care of this restaurant, it's no longer going to be able to give you things. And so there's mechanical benefits of keeping your restaurant clean and under repair, but because of the stress that's caused by the juncture, you may not be able to do that. So you have to figure out, am I going to make noodles today, or am I going to fix the restaurant so it can keep sustaining the family in the long run? And so there's a lot of stuff in there that is very, very personal to myself and to Banana as well. So Akrotiri for sure is the game that is like I hold up as a testament to me as a game designer. But Jiangshi is the one that I hold up as a testament to me as a person.
Love
And
that.
when we're talking about covers, and if you ask Quan
I
Chai, like,
love the cover for
yeah.
it, by the
If you
way.
ever have Quan
Quanchai
Chai,
knocked out of the
if you ever have
park.
Quan Chai on the show, ask him about the cover for Juncture. And for me and for Banana, for me, it speaks to me in words that you can't hear. It touched my soul. It basically represents me better than any other piece of art in a game that I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of games. And it just isn't because I was the one that gave art direction or Banana was the one that gave art direction. It's because, Quan Chai's Asian. And it's just because he's an Asian artist. It's because he
Mhm.
captured that sense of family, and he captured that sense of working together. And he captured that sense of the juncture kind of looming over
Yeah, that
everybody.
foreboding feeling I was about to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's this great marriage of this hope, but with this sort of foreboding figure that's almost like, oh, we can do this, but also that's scary.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
think about that, just what you just said in terms of a family moving across oceans,
Yeah.
paying like inordinate amounts of money to get here, knowing that they're going to have to struggle, but it's better than where they left. And they're going to have to struggle in the face of racism, in the face of classism, in the face of all this other stuff. And that's exactly what that cover is. It's like hopeful but foreboding, right? So
Yeah.
you got it, you get it.
Yeah.
And the fact that Quan Chai's piece can speak that to people is just like chef's kiss. It's awesome, right?
And this is also an interesting new RPG that you have, just because there is a marriage of RPG and game mechanics as well, is what I've heard.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of history in it. So this is the interesting thing I heard about the book. So, and I was doing some reading up on this. One, I love that it sounds like what you have at the beginning of the book is that sort of that trigger warning, that preparation for people to go through some of these harder to talk about things. That safety net that we always find in RPGs, which also sometimes tends to be not the first thing you read in an RPG book. I kind of love that you did that first. I agree. I also hope that changes, because I've definitely been in a lot of tough RPG situations because of that, with other people at a table where we've had something happen or where something has happened to me and no one knows what to do because we don't have any safety measures in play. And when you're storytelling and world building, there's a lot of things that can come up. So I think it's great that you put that first. And there's a bunch of history in it, which I'm a huge history nerd. So I just also love like the folklore aspect, the history aspect. And while I know a ton about Western history, I don't know a ton about like Eastern and Asian history as much as I would like to. So I think I just want to read it just to read about history.
The interesting thing is that it has very little about Eastern history. It's actually more history about the diaspora, so the Chinese who moved into Canada and the United States and their history, which is actually more interesting for you, I think.
Probably, yeah, it will be.
Like since I live here. How do these subcultures fit into the history that you know? Right? So the most amazing thing that has happened in the last couple of weeks is people actually talking about things like sundown cities and people talking about Oklahoma because of Watchmen and because of Watchmen
and because
Lovecraft
of Lovecraft, Lovecraft Country, which is
county. I can't remember, but
county. It's county.
Yeah,
it's Lovecraft County. That's what it is on HBO. But
that amazes me that pop culture can make people talk about this stuff.
This is the power of story, right?
Yeah, maybe more in some ways than pulling down a statue, right? So it's
and then our own history, because it was interesting. I was listening to some podcasts even that were talking about Lovecraft County, that were talking about basically the fact that all of this stuff, like, it's based on real things, and people have been going and researching it because they were like, this isn't real. And it is.
It's so
because
funny.
They were never taught it. Right.
That my American friends, who I obviously have many American friends because that's what the internet's like, they didn't know. I know because I look at this stuff. This is the stuff I'm interested in, and that's not saying, oh, I'm better because I know. It's like saying, like, why don't you know? That's more the question is, why don't Americans know this stuff about their own country? Like this happened. This happens. It still happens, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like,
and we don't even
be a person of color in this particular city after the sun goes down, because bad things will happen. Right? Yeah. I mean, the whole state of Oregon, used to be that way. So
I think it's very interesting when we talk about what we know of history and what we know of what we think is our history. This strange sort of idea of there's what we know, there's the pieces that we know, and there's the pieces that are just never told, that are still a very huge part of our history. Even in Canada, we have this.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
the weird thing too.
100%.
People think in Canada we know all these things, and I'm like, no, there's a ton of stuff I don't know.
Yeah,
actually.
no, it's really interesting to, and the funny thing is I hate history. Well, I hated history, and
Really?
there's a reason why. So history is written by the victors. The victors are usually not people who look like me in this area of the world, and so it's exactly that. Like, the only reason why I know about the stuff that I know about is because I listen to people talk about it, like that oral history that gets passed down. The history that's written, and the history that has their very nice web pages written about them or whatever, it's
Yeah.
not the history of my people. It's not the history of Black people in America. It's not the history of the indigenous people in Canada or the United States. It's white people history.
Yeah.
And that's what gets taught in the schools, and that's what gets tested in the schools, and that's what we all know. And the thing about it is that it's actually, a lot of it isn't exactly true. It's twisted a little bit. It's whitewashed to make people look better. And if you dig a little bit deeper into some of the history that you think it's like, oh, it's
There's
like
little
why
threads
Adam
that
ruins
you
everything
can.
is awesome, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, no, actually, this is
Yeah.
what's happened in that, or this is why these words are said this way, or there's some
But
really interesting stuff out there.
the powerful stuff that I think that I've really enjoyed exploring, at least in the last few years too, as someone who always loved stories and always loved history for the fact of a good story, I guess is what I
Yes,
usually loved. And
that I agree.
yeah. And so something that I've really loved exploring in terms of learning more about history in the stories that we don't always know is through folklore, because I think folklore is a great way to actually, because in every folklore story there's always a piece of truth, and there's
Yes.
usually these folklore stories are allegories for something.
Interestingly enough, that brings us back to Kids on Bikes.
Yeah.
Because that's how I actually started writing for Kids on Bikes, was
Really?
so as folklore. I love folklore, like shows like Lore,
I was going to
anything
say,
about.
I love lore.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Menke.
Yeah.
My kids
I
love that.
actually
The
say
sign off is hilarious.
sometimes when I host videos, because I'm also a host for another channel called Top 10 Nerd, and one of the things I was doing the other day was subscribe and go and say hi, because I like it when people say hi. And I was like, I don't know if any lore listeners will be in the comments, but yeah, I love lore.
Yeah. And so lore got me thinking a lot about how we interpret folklore, and how kids on bikes particularly would encounter some of those folklore pieces, but in a like an 80s sensibilities. And so that's where a lot of the stuff in my adventures for Kids on Bikes comes from, is from folklore. The one that I wrote with my kids is about Canadian folklore, specifically the Wendigo, and how that works into, or I shouldn't say Canadian, I should say Indigenous folklore, and how that works into the whole idea that we were trying to spin a story about, people who aren't treated very well, and what that turns into. And then the previous one was about Rhode Island. I love Rhode Island. My friends are from Rhode Island, and Rhode Island is this funny, weird little place in America that's like the smallest place ever, but it's got like big stories about it, right? I mean, like, that's Lovecraftian, right?
It is very Lovecraftian.
So the whole idea of Providence, Rhode Island, and whatnot. So I wrote a whole adventure in Rhode Island that was based on a couple things that happened, or may have happened, or may not have happened in history. So I love alt history. I love the idea of history gone wrong, or this could have really happened. That's what gets me.
I love those stories when you hear that is the great thing about folklore, is these big stories that are did this really happen? And you want to like find out more about it, because you're almost like not sure. And the stories that we can't believe, that we think this is too incredulous to have happened.
Yeah.
Right? And it did really happen.
Yes.
That is the stuff and that's where you really learn stuff though too. The stuff I think that surprises you, that you go and research and find out the truths of, and you're like, wow, this is changed wild, the way I see the world. Yeah.
It's stranger than fiction. as they say.
Yes. So when it comes to, so when you were writing Kids on Bikes and you wanted to bring folklore into that, is there something specifically that you've written that you feel like really stands out to you, or for Kids on Bikes that you really feel is close to your heart and close to?
I mean, Kids on Bikes is close to my heart because I got to write with my kids, my own kids, who
Yeah.
also ride bikes every now and then.
Yeah.
So that
And
was
you were
really
able to
fun.
bring them into that, which
Yeah.
is fun.
Yeah, like I said, both of them are theater nerds, so they love telling stories and they like
Have you guys
that
all
kind of
played
thing.
Kids on Bikes and stuff together?
Actually, no. Eli
Oh.
they really like Dread. Dread because
Oh,
they like
yeah.
the kinetics of the Jenga tower.
Yeah, Dread is really fun.
Yeah, but I
Can't
mean,
fault them.
Ethan plays Pathfinder and Starfinder with his friends.
Mhm.
So yeah, I should play Kids on Bikes with them, but they're not from that '80s era, so
Yeah, so they were like, we're gonna have fun creating this with you, but this isn't our world. This is your world,
yeah.
Dad.
This is my yeah. It's like you used to put coins in video games. What's up with
Yeah,
that?
what is that? Yeah. If you could write anything for for let's say any even of the RPGs that we have in the wheelhouse, be it like Kids on Bikes, Teens in Space, the Junior Brave Survival Guide,
Yeah.
Kids on Brooms, any of these fun, what's a story that you feel like you would want to tell, or like what's something you'd love to write for and love to write about? Do you think would fit in that world?
I like writing about almost anything. I've always got something to talk about, I guess. Or as Banana Channel say, he'll just go listen to a podcast and something will come into his mind that makes sense. I love podcasts, so I listen to them incessantly. They just kind of fuel, because they're only words, right? They're only spoken. My brain is allowed to go off places.
Yeah.
Which is definitely different
I find
than watching
that
something.
I feel like your brain is more engaged when you're listening to something.
For sure. And I'm super interested, right? So yeah, no, I think we are doing something Junior Braves like ish for Kids on Bikes. But they're not, it's not a crossover, won't be the same thing.
Okay. It got me excited. I was like, crossover.
No. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of stuff. I haven't, the overlay system's interesting. I haven't really thought about what I do there.
That would be kind of cool.
No, I think RPGs and board gaming adjacent stuff is getting so much closer together that there's almost nothing I wouldn't write for unless it was particularly oppressive to people.
I mean, I think that's not something we need to write. So I think that's good.
Right?
Yeah, I agree with you.
I would write for anything under the Renegade flag right now, currently.
That's good. The other thing I was going to ask is, I know that you also write, you design, right? Same thing, really. There's been a lot of games that you've been involved in that have been licensed as well.
Yeah.
Like you had the Legend of Korra game, you did Rock Paper Wizard, and you've done like a lot of these sort of like franchises or licensed properties. How do you find that versus sort of creating your own stuff in your own worlds?
Oh, I actually like it. I like it a lot. I don't like it more, but I might like it almost just as much. There's some reasons why I don't like it. I don't like getting approvals. I don't like waiting for approvals.
Yeah.
But I for me, part of the design puzzle that that challenges me and that I really enjoy is making a game work within the constraints of the characters or the movie or the series or whatever rules the licensor gives me. Like they say,
you've also done like Orphan Black, Godfather, I think is another one.
Done lots of them.
You've done lots of them, and I feel like I think I can say that you've done them well. Like that is that's hard to do. I think you have. I don't know. I'm sure everyone in the chat agrees, but
it's definitely a challenge, and it's definitely something that I don't take lightly. Like so any of the licenses that I've ever done is about something that I myself like. So I want to actually play that game, and I want to see the world expressed through the game. And I don't want it to be such a nod to fans that only fans will like it. So I want it to actually be a good game too. Because game design is the first and foremost thing. It's paying homage to the license is kind of the secondary thing to me, but it's super important to have them both integrated. And so how I do that is I just pick an experience. Like what experience is this game doing? It's not what episode, it's not what character, it's like what experience.
Mhm.
So like give me an IP.
So let's say if you were to do a Lovecraft game
Sure. So if I was to do a
in
Lovecraft
that
game,
world.
yeah. One of the things I dislike about current Lovecraft games is that they're always talking about, I take out my Tommy gun and I shoot the,
Yeah.
Cthulhu. It's like, you can't do that. That's an elder god that is going to just melt your brain. Why are
I
you
feel like
bothering with this?
I would say in Mansions of Madness that's a thing that happens, but then I was about to say that's a thing you usually try to do, but it usually fails.
It usually
So,
fails.
yeah.
But yeah, so I would write more about, the existential dread that is
Mm,
occurring. The other thing that I'd like to take out of some of the Cthulhu mythos is the notion that insanity is a thing. Not that it's not a thing, but that it's a scary thing, or mental health
okay.
issues are a scary thing.
So you'd want to like
Um,
separate that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
I
very
feel that.
fine line for me. Being as my job is my job,
Yeah.
that I don't want to demonize or vilify or
Mental
just basically,
illness. Yeah.
yeah, mental illness is not something that we should put in that light. And so I'd
It's
like to
not
figure
just
out.
a handful of sanity tokens.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
It's
I
more
feel you.
serious than that. And so how do we roll that back? Because the trope right now is really, it's you got health and you got sanity and you have a gun. That's what you got, and you're fighting elder gods. But there's got to be a little bit more nuance to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, and besides the whole fact that H.P. Lovecraft was a huge racist,
That is actually a thing that I have heard is very good as well about Lovecraft.
yes, yes,
I'll
I
show
like
that.
so Banana, who's on the feed right now, she's been trying to get me to get HBO to watch Warrior for the longest time, and then she'll always give me shows to watch that are in there. It's like I don't have HBO, but now that Lovecraft County's on there, I might have to.
And there's going to be a bunch of DC stuff. It's unfortunate. I'm like, I don't want to have to buy this, but I'm going to have to buy this.
Yeah,
this is how it goes.
it.
That's great. So that's really cool. I think that you have a really good take on licensed games, I will say, because they are really hard to nail. And as someone who is
Yeah.
a huge fan of a lot of different fandoms, it's really great to have designers like you in the mix.
Well, I think there's an actual reason why it's better now.
Yeah.
It's because the game designers are actually fans of those things. Like,
Yeah. Well,
because
it's like,
we're all around that age where we would have been fans of those things anyway.
yeah.
Whereas a lot of the old time designs, they might not have actually been fans of
And into that,
IP.
yeah.
They might have had to go do a ton of research. I do as well, but they might have had to. This is the first time I've ever seen this thing, and I'm gonna make a strawberry shortcake game. I'm a 50-year-old man making a game about strawberry shortcake.
Yeah.
For
It's
Hasbro.
like, yeah. Whereas now we have like, we got Marvel games, Harry Potter games. We got all these things, and people are like,
fans
I love
of
it.
those things, right?
Exactly.
Like if you could have like a legit My Little Pony game made by people who are legit fans of My Little Pony, but they're 40 and 50 years old.
That's right.
And
I love
male,
it.
perhaps.
And
right?
and Steven Universe, things like that. Like all of these shows are things that we all watch, which I love.
Right. Whereas before you would have thought, oh, you're a professional and you can't watch those cartoons. It's like, no, I grew up with them. I love them. I still watch them.
I'm doing it. So before we sort of get ready to wrap, I wanted to see if there are questions in the chat. Desiree.
Yes, indeed there are.
Amazing.
Before we get,
I felt like you were maybe waiting there, like when are we going to talk about these questions?
Shut up.
So no, it's all been really, really great, actually,
awesome.
And I didn't want to interrupt. So, but we do have questions. But before we get to the questions, if you could, Amanda, just mention the giveaway again and the code word, just for people who joined in a little later.
So friends, we have some kids on bikes coming your way, and I believe we have 2 kits to be giving out, 2 of those. The code word today is diary. As in, don't read our diaries without asking us, please. I don't think Sen or I would like that.
I do have designer diaries. You can read those.
Ooh.
All right.
It actually sounds like it'd be full of fun Easter egg things.
It's not.
Just chaos.
All right. So to the questions. So we have a few. well, quite a few. So what is your favorite role to play in D&D?
Oh, bard for sure, because I like to sing. And so I will actually write songs and poems and sing them and do that. I won't play an instrument while I'm doing it, but I'll actually legitimately sing them. So I like bards, and I like rogues. And being 5'2", that's who I think I am anyway. Is that kind of sneaky performative person? So that's who I play.
I'll have to like get an instrument sometime. If we play an RPG together, I will play music for you so you can sing to it.
Cool. Let's do
We'll
that.
do some music improv. It'll be fun.
There you go. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, with RPGs, do you like running or playing them more?
I actually like running them more. Yeah, because so I have a really loosey-goosey style of running games. Anybody who's ever played a game with me, RPG, will understand that. Like Banana's in the feed right now. She plays with me, and I just let them do what they want. I have almost zero prep. I tell stories. I let them tell stories. I love, and I'm curious about what are they going to do next. What are these, people who I'm playing with? What neat things they're gonna do next? And I enjoy that more than playing. I want to see my friends do awesome things and tell cool stories. So I like being the
so
game
fun.
master.
I
Because I don't
love
think of it
when
as
people do that.
mastering, anyways.
Mm.
I think of
It's
it
just
more
like
as
an
a
experience.
facilitator. I'm an experiential facilitator.
Love
There
that.
you go.
And then do you have a preference for themes, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, or other?
Oh, that's a great question. I like all of those themes, but really lately, and it's weird because I'm not a fan of horror. And I was just talking about this yesterday with Jason Brenner. Jason used to be with Upper Deck, um, and we were talking about The Hitcher, which is a movie from 1986. Dolph Lundgren was the titular character in that, and it was the very first movie in my life that ever scared me. And I grew up in the slasher era, right in the 80s, right, with like Halloween and
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
yeah, and Nightmare on Elm Street and all those things, right? And none of those scared me ever. It was just like, this is gross and gory, and I don't want to watch it. And so, as of late, because I've been more introduced uh, by like people like Banana to a lot of other horror around the world, it's like, yeah, I really enjoy horror. And part of it is because I am an experiential game designer. So I want people to experience things. So my goal in every game is like to replicate an experience or to make somebody feel something. I don't care necessarily about the score, the mechanics. I care if they felt something. And horror is one of the most elusive things to make people feel in a set board game. I don't know if anything really actually does it yet. And so it's become my go-to kind of holy grail, I guess, of game experiences and themes. It's like, we're making a horror game because I want people to feel horrible. Not horrible, but be scared.
You want people to feel genuine terror.
Yeah. And the thing is,
Yeah.
like, so Juncture is ostensibly a horror game, but it's really not, because the genre that it comes from, which is Hong Kong cinema, Juncture movies, they're actually a mix of horror, action, comedy, and they're really
They have
horrible.
everything.
Yeah, although the
Wow.
recent ones are more horrible. So Rigor Mortis is more like a horror movie than Mr. Vampire was, but there's almost like a decade between them in terms of when they were released. Yeah. Oh,
That's
more than
cool.
that. There might have been. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Rigor Mortis is 2013, and Mr. Vampire is 1986. Yeah. So a long time ago. So more than I thought it was 2003. Sorry.
Wow.
My brain was not working right. But
I
yeah,
feel
so
like
lots of time.
horror is definitely a hard one to. That's a hard one to put in a game. Like genuine. Like I felt a little, anxious when I play games, but
yeah,
I don't think I've ever been like
anxiety and tension are definitely things you can feel.
Yeah.
But it's harder to feel that real horror, and because horror comes from revulsion, and so like if you want to get psychology of emotions, that's where it comes from, and disgust and things like that. So it's kind of not a precursor to that, but a postcursor to all of those. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so yeah, horror is my kind of big holy grail right now, but I like all genres. I even like romance. We made a romance game. It just never came out.
I want to play this romance game now.
It was a romance storytelling game based on an intellectual property about time travel and Scotland. If that is if you can guess it, good, because I can't say it out loud. Don't say it out loud.
I have ideas. I'm not going to say anything.
You can tell me later.
Ideas.
I will not say anything either. Do you have a preference on player color?
Yellow. I love yellow. Yellow's my favorite color in the world.
Yellow's also my favorite color to play with. So.
And then we'll have to fight. We will
for yellow. I never have to fight anyone for yellow. I was just about to say.
This is the thing.
Excellent.
Of the games that you've designed, which one went through the biggest changes from initial idea to finished game, and what was that like?
That's a great question. Wow.
Yeah.
So, really, I don't think many games that I've designed have actually gone through a lot of mechanical changes. Mostly what happens is what we call scope creep, where the scope of the game becomes like, we thought it was going to be this, and then Kickstarter makes it into this. That's usually what happens. And scope creep is horrible. But it happens all the time. So I think, some of the biggest ones that's happened to, Kingdom Rush was like over $1 million on Kickstarter. So there's going to be scope creep. It just happens when you have that many things that people want and you have that much money coming in. You're going to have the stretch goals. We planned it all out. It's just more of a question of doing the work to do that is a lot. And so it didn't change so much in mechanical nature. It just changed in the degree of stuff that we had to do because there was so much more eyes on that project, right? And money put into it. So it's a bad problem, but it's a good problem to have, I guess.
Yeah. I guess it means that the project is doing well, but it's also like, yikes, that's a lot more than I anticipated.
Yeah. I mean, there's been other things where we pitched certain ways, but in the end, it didn't come out like that because what we pitched didn't work. But it's actually rarer than you'd think. Most things kind of work not the first time, but most things when we pitch them, they generally work. But that's experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. This one's a little bit longer. So I noticed that Sen almost always designs games with someone else. Is that on purpose? And do you prefer to work in tandem with someone? Or is it more that you've already built great working relationships with people that it just happens that you mostly design with them?
Both. I prefer working with a partner because, like I told you before, when I worked by myself, nothing got done.
Yeah.
It's not procrastination. It's more, it sits up here and I think about it and I ruminate on it and I never got it to the table. But working with Jay and working with Jesse and working with Erica and working with Banana has got me to just put it on the table, write it down, just get it out. I can actually make an RPG in a day now. That's how easy it is now. In some ways, it doesn't mean it's going to be good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like rewriting the world in a day, but I can make a working thing in a day.
Which is very different than how it used to be in a day. So I'm just
but that's 8 hours straight writing though. And just the mechanical parts, not all the world building parts of it.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, so it's kind of like Jerry Maguire, right? You complete me type stuff. So I can't work with anybody. I have to work with people who are friends, because, I've got my quirks, they've got their quirks, and we need to forgive each other of our quirks. And it's hard to do when you're not friends, especially when there's money involved. Jay is my best friend. He's my kids. If I die and my wife die at the same time, Jay gets my kids. That's the kind of relationship we have. Jesse was my mentee, just like Daryl was my mentee. But Daryl and I are too much alike, so we can't work together very well. Whereas Jesse fills like the gaps that I have, and I fill some of the gaps that Jesse has. Erica and I work together. So Erica Burris, who is another one of the hosts on Maple Syrup Show with myself and Jesse, we work together because we've worked together for years now. And then Banana and I, we just clicked. Every time I shot up an idea at her, she's like, yeah, that sounds great. And it's not because she accepts everything I says, because she definitely pushes back, but it's more like we have the same wavelength. And she's also really good at getting back to me and I get back to her. So anything that can keep the cycle going, somebody who can keep the cycle going with me is good. If I push something out there and somebody doesn't feed back to me, it doesn't work. Just like if somebody feeds back to me and I don't push back to them, it doesn't work. And I've found that in working with a couple other people, it just it doesn't work because we don't have that communication going, or the communication style that I particularly work well in. It's not the right communication style, it's just my communication style. And so Jesse, Jay, Erica, Banana are 4 people who I work really well with because we communicate in similar ways. Not in similar ways. We communicate in ways that we appreciate each other. That's probably a better way to say it, because we're different, right?
All right. So 2 more questions here. I
Sure.
think. Do you think you work in psychology? So I think this was actually from Banana.
It
Do
is.
you think your work in psychology inspires you when making systems either in RPGs or board games?
I love that question.
Yeah, so I study behavioral science and communication sciences specifically. And so a lot of the things that I've learned over my, how old am I now? My 30 years in practice, have been around communication, have been around behavior. And what is gaming if not, communication and behaving around a table? So, I mean, a really simple way of putting it is like I use incentivization, so operant conditioning, very, Skinnerish stuff when we're talking about just scoring mechanisms in games. And I truly believe that if we're not seeing the right behavior in a game, we need to go investigate, well, what are we scoring? How are we rewarding that person for what they're doing? Because if they're not doing the behavior we're expecting, we're probably not rewarding them correctly. Or maybe that's the right way to do it. Maybe we should listen to that player too. So I use therapeutic tools a lot in games. I use psychology a lot in games, because that's really part of human nature, is to play games. And the way that most people work, most, not all, but if we did a giant bell curve, we're going to find that most people work somewhere within this scheme of things when they are put into a game system. And what's that all about? And then, another easy one for people out there who are aspiring game designers, go look up Magic the Gathering psychographics, and you'll find that there are 3 majors and 2 or 3 new ones that have come out since Rosewater and his team have started talking about psychographics a couple years ago. Well, like a long time ago, really. But those are like player profiles. And if you can make games that suit certain player profiles, those people will like those games because they have drives to play in certain ways, right? So there's definitely a use for psychology in game design, just like there's definitely a use for math in game design. It's just different how you look at it.
Awesome. Okay, and then one last question.
Sure.
I think I know we are over our usual time, but what is some can't talk. Last question.
Okay.
Too much pressure.
You got this, Desiree.
What are your top 2 recommendations for podcasts?
So other than Lore, because Lore's awesome, so I listen an awful lot to 99% Invisible, which is a design podcast about the world and the built world and the world we live in. And it just gets me thinking about everything. I actually very rarely listen to game design podcasts. I like them, but I don't listen to them that much. If I was to recommend a game design podcast to listen to, it would be the RPG Panelcast, because I was not writing as many games in the RPG end of things. And it really taught me about things like narrative structure and things like that I brought back into board games. And then when I was writing RPGs, and it's like, oh yeah, now I know all this stuff. It's stuff that you kind of know anyways, but it's just a little bit adjacent to the main topic. So it actually gets your mind thinking a little bit wider, rather than focusing just on board game design. Because all that board game design stuff is probably stuff I already know. And I'm not like tooting my own horn, but it's like I've been doing this for over a decade. So it's stuff that I probably know. And it's just you're preaching to the choir, right? Whereas stuff that's a little adjacent to it, or stuff that is not about game design at all, it's like now my mind is free to think about these things, but maybe in game terms, right? So other ones that I like are like 20,000 Hertz and wireframe. 20,000 Hertz is about sound design. And basically what they do is they take one sound, one like really famous sound that you might have heard, like the one of them last week was on like the Netflix ta-dum sound, ta-dum, that Netflix sound. And they talk about it for like half an hour about that 4-second sound. It's awesome.
Awesome.
And then the other one is Wireframe, which I just started listening to recently based on the recommendation from 20,000 Hertz. And it is run by the lead designer from Adobe. So it's all about UX and UI, which is super important for game design, by the way. It's one of the most important parts that we forget about. And UX and UI combines things like graphic design, illustration, and psychology all in one. So it's very much in that wheelhouse of stuff that is adjacent to game design that gets you thinking about your game design in a different way. Whereas if you listen to a game design podcast, you might never understand that or get that level of expertise, because that is all that Wireframe talks about, right? So get out there, listen to wide things. Don't just focus on game design.
Yeah, those are some good suggestions.
All right, I think that is it for now. So Amanda, if you want to just mention the code word and stuff one last time, and then take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching, everybody. One more time, that code word for you is diary, and you can get we have 2 Kids on Bikes deluxe packs up for grabs. So get your hands on some Kids on Bikes and play it, because it's super fun and it's super easy to pick up and play. And I really think now is the time for RPGs. The time is now. So diary. All right, friends. Well, Sen, can you just remind us sort of what you do, who you are, where your stuff is, where we can find you, and also let us know about. Okay, here we go. Juncture.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
This is okay.
Yeah, it's not bad, not bad.
Can you tell us about sort of where we can also keep an eye out for that as well?
Yeah, so if you follow my social medias, and really the easiest one to follow is on Twitter, which is at Sen-Foong Lim, all one word, SenFoongLim. We'll be talking about our late backer kit coming up, hopefully within the next couple of days. I think we just got approval for backer kit today, so we should be posting the link within the week for those of you who didn't catch the campaign. And that's too bad, but you can still get it. It's still going to be awesome. It's still going to be very cool. So look for Junction, Blood in the Banquet Hall on my social media, on Game and a Curry social media, on Wet Ink social media, and Banana Chan's own social media. On Facebook, if you follow Meeple Syrup, that is the weekly web show that I do with Erica Buyuris, and who did Scott Pilgrim for Renegade, and Jesse Wright. And all 3 game designers, all 3 of us are game designers who work together often and apart often. And we run a show that is about designers discussing design. So the industry, but from the perspective of game designers. So we'll talk with publishers, we'll talk with other designers, we'll talk with illustrators, artists, convention runners, everybody in the industry who has anything to do with the industry will bring you on. But then we're going to talk about it from what do designers need to know about that position, or about you as a person, or about your company, and why is it important for designers who are mostly freelancers to understand that. So that's what the show's about. So check it out.
Super informative.
Meeple Syrup is on Facebook. We are on hiatus for the summer, but that's over in a couple of days. And so we'll be starting up in September. We don't know what we're going to do, but we'll do something, I'm sure. And then, on Twitter's the easiest way to follow me personally.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. And this was so great and interesting. I'm going to ask about the glass in your face next time I see you. And thank you everyone as well for watching and for all those awesome questions in the chat. My name is Amanda McKnight. You can find me on the Renegade channel with your monthly Renegade recaps. And thank you, Desiree, for your amazing producing. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.